Finally, we can crack open a beer and watch things unfold because Newcastle United have made their first transfer bid, officially it seems, of the summer, going after Nottingham Forest's Anthony Elanga. The move might have been knocked back, but it's time to take a closer look why Eddie Howe, for the best part of a year now, seems keen on this player, why that might be the case, but also why the rejected bid isn't too much to worry about just yet. It's all coming up, Newcastle fans, so do me a favour and make sure you stick around. Welcome back to Black and White Banter, ladies and gentlemen. I'm back outside St James's Park for another video. I hope all is well. I hope you are not going too insane in the house without football. The Club World Cup seems to be splitting opinion, but I actually think as it's progressing, I'm looking on with jealousy that I'm not over in America right now watching Newcastle playing a tournament like that. But anyway, if you're new around here, Newcastle fans, do me a favour now. The transfer window is starting to ramp up and pre-season is just round the corner. Whack that follow, whack that subscribe and get Black and White Banter across all social media. Lots of different videos on TikTok, Instagram and Facebook. I am going over for pre-season. You are going to be watching me go along. I'm going to take you with me to Celtic, to Singapore, to South Korea, and everything in between, straight back for Atletico Madrid. So if you want to see the adventures, and my God, if it's anything like Japan last year, there are some adventures, what I follow. But anyway, we're not here to talk about pre-season just yet. We are here to talk about Newcastle United's transfer window, summer transfer window, which I think is one of the biggest that we have had probably in recent history in terms of the importance. It's underway. And Newcastle United, as reported by Mr. David Ornstein, who I will say is normally very reliable, and every other journalist, would you believe, has piggybacked on the back of his exclusive. God, honestly, the in-the-know world is an awful one. I'm glad I don't work in it. He's reporting that Newcastle United bid £45 million for Anthony Elanga. Nottingham Forest knocked it straight back. They are looking for slightly more, which I'll touch on in this video, but there was no counter-offer made. So that's pretty much where things are right now. But I'm not here too much to talk about that. You already know that stuff if you've been following the news. I'm here to talk about why Eddie Howe seems to be a big fan of this player and why 2 windows now he's looking at him. Now look, no Newcastle fan watching this would claim that we don't need another right winger. I would be shocked. It's an area that we've all talked about for some time now. But I'm going to take you back to the press conference just after Newcastle United 0, Everton 1. Final game of the season in this lovely place behind me. Most nerve-wracking for some time. But Eddie Howe, we just qualified for Champions League, was asked about the transfer window naturally. And what I found quite telling is not only did he say, look, we know we need to strengthen, but he said, as a minimum, we need to be looking at strengthening the players, replacing the players that have left the football club. Now, yes, you could go back to Elliot Anderson last summer. That still left a gaping hole, in my opinion. But fortunately, Tonali came back from suspension and the rest, as they say, is history. But I think he was talking about Miguel Almiron and, of course, Lloyd Kelly, and we know we need a centre-back, but Miguel Almiron specifically. Now, if I was to ask you what you thought Miguel Almiron, love him or hate him, brought to this football club when he was better, when he was actually playing across his career, even under Eddie Howe, I would imagine a lot of you, I mean, I was never a big Almiron fan, too one-footed for me. And apart from that purple patch, never really offered enough in a Newcastle shirt. But a lot of you would tell me energetic, full of life and good at carrying the ball up the pitch. But not only that, we think about some of the best Miguel Almiron goals that have been scored in his career before he went back to Atlanta. You would say left foot, cutting in, curling it into that top corner or just scoring from cutting the ball inside because he always played on that right-hand side. Well, I think Anthony Elanga appeals to Eddie Howe because of his ability to not only play on the right-hand side, but to carry that ball up the pitch. Well, I think first and foremost, Eddie Howe likes Anthony Elanga because he could offer Newcastle United that progressive carrying that a player like Almiron once upon a time did. Last season in the Premier League, Elanga had the longest on average progressive carries with a football of any other player, 15 metres. And I'm going to share on the screen some of those progressive carries. Look at whereabouts on the pitch they are, which leads me on to my next point. Anthony Elanga is a 2-footed player. Of his career since the start of the 2021 Premier League season, he's had 55% of his shots with his right foot and 36% with his left foot. Of all the players in that time who've had 100 shots or more, he has the 5th lowest difference between the two, which sounds so wordy, I know. That basically means he's got the closest crossover between left-footed shots and right-footed shots of any other player. Well, 5 players in there. So Newcastle United will be getting a player who could potentially play on both sides. And look, as I've just shown you earlier, look at where the progressive carries are on both sides of the pitch. And I think about Newcastle's left side, Anthony Gordon, Harvey Barnes. We keep talking about whether they can play on the right-hand side. Well, what you would be getting with Anthony Elanga is another player you could throw in the mix who can play on both sides. And if you compare that to our only out-and-out right-sided midfielder, Jacob Murphy, you are getting something very different. Jacob Murphy, brilliant at whipping a ball in. I really hope that he proves so many doubters wrong and continues improving, working hard in training, as Dan Burns talked about on his podcast this week, and continues playing well next season, whipping beautiful balls in for Alexander Isak and also scoring goals. But Jacob Murphy is a very one-footed player who's always going to go wide rather than cut inside. Anthony Elanga can come inside when he's playing on the right and score goals with his left foot, carry the ball with his left foot. That is something that you could argue Newcastle were looking at Brian Mbeumo for. Like, I don't want to keep going back to an Almiron, but when Almiron did have his purple patch, as I've previously mentioned, a lot of them goals were scored coming in on the left-hand side and burying it from there. Jacob Murphy's not capable of that. We are currently not in a position where we have too many players who can play on the right, who give defenders that different headache by coming inside. We don't have that. Tino Livramento offers that slightly as an overlapping fullback when he goes on one of his mazy runs. That is what Anthony Elanga can offer. And to have a player who can interchange on both sides. I mean, look at his Premier League goals. I'll share them on the screen now as well. 5 with his right foot, 5 with his left foot, and the rest with head. It's a very rare quality in a player to be able to use both feet in the way he has. And some of his goals last season for Nottingham Forest were a mix of both right foot, left foot. Now, not only with Newcastle's intensity in mind, but also with that ball carrying. If I was to ask you again, what players in the team are capable of driving the ball up the pitch at speed, I'm going to guess you would probably give it me the likes of Anthony Gordon, Tino Livramento from full-back, Jacob Murphy to a degree, but again, his progressive carries aren't great in terms of stats last season. And then Sandro Tonali, it's not the responsibility you want Bruno to bring in. Joe Linton can do so, but with a certain, not that quick, more in an aggressive strength sort of way, holding onto that football. You're not really getting that. And if I look at players in previous seasons that have been responsible for that, getting us up the other end of the pitch, I would look at Joe Willock. Joe Willock has split opinion, and probably rightly so. Last season, he didn't cut the mustard when he came on, largely as a substitute, admittedly, but he wasn't really getting back to the Joe Willock we know. Go back to the 22-23 season, look at Joe Willock's progressive carries on a chart for Newcastle United. I'm going to put them on the screen. That's how important and how significant his role was of just legs, driving us up the other end of the pitch, and he was brilliant at it. We don't currently have that anymore. And here are the current stats for dragging that ball up the pitch. Of course, Anthony Gordon storms those charts. Another one on the list is a striker, Alexander Isak. He's already up there. You are wanting someone to get from A to B, not just on a counter-attack, but just get us up the other end of the pitch in fast transition. Anthony Elanga offers that. And if you really want to dive deep on a player who's no longer at the football club and what we used to have in these sorts of players, I've just mentioned Joe Willock's stats on that progressive carry and driving the ball up the pitch. This is where Almiron was when he played more football for us. Another player who no longer plays for the football club, who obviously offered us just energy, just getting up the other end of the pitch. But I think Anthony Elanga is continuing to split opinion. I can see Eddie Howe, because not only profile on the pitch, as we're talking about, I can see Eddie Howe's rationale, but I think he's sealing off it as well. He's a young boy, 23 years old. He's broke into the Swedish national team, so Alexander Isak is familiar with him, and that's another string to the bow that he's familiar with playing with our striker, who you'd argue he was trying to set up week upon week. But he just offers us a young bit of potential that's already rose to a certain level of potential. He's reached it last season for Nottingham Forest. We've seen what he can offer, but there's got to be more in the tank. Now, I mentioned at the start of this video not being too worried that this bid's been rejected. And, like, I've seen a lot of Newcastle fans on social media saying, why aren't we paying it? Why are we paying less than what Nottingham Forest even want in the first place? I'm glad some of yous aren't looking after businesses, I tell you. Because, look, it is only June. Newcastle United have made an offer, and I think there's somehow David Ornstein has found out about this because some offers Newcastle want to be made public. Well, why? Why, you might be asking me? Well, look, Anthony Elanga is friends with William Asula. That's very obvious on social media. Comments on Instagram, TikTok. He's friends with Anthony Gordon. Again, comments. Even Sven Botman's jumped in his comments more recently. He knows Alexander Isak from international duty and Emil Kraft, both playing for the same national team. There are links there, but there's a bigger scope to this. Newcastle United, no disrespect to Nottingham Forest, who a club I respect loads, are on a much better project trajectory than what Forest are. We have got Champions League football, which for any player in world football is one of the biggest pulls, but also we are backed by a project that is probably going to go places faster than Nottingham Forest, and I could have egg on my face there after they did so well last season. Was that a flash in the pan? Well, I hope for their loyal fan base, no, because I do have a lot of time and respect for Forest. It's one of my favourite away days. This is a great project to join, full of young English players. Livramento, Hall, Gordon, friends of Elanga. You've got his Swedish teammates. You've got a passionate fan base in a 52,000-seater stadium. There are so many ticks here. By us making a bid that's not quite at the valuation, it's now being reported we're going to think about going back in. Let's see what this does to the player's head. Let's put the feelers out. He knows we want him. It's now public press. Everybody's talking about it. How much does the player and the player's agent want it? Let's just see how this one trickles. If we go back in, great. As I've talked about in this video, I can see why Eddie Howe wants this player because I think he offers us something that we've not only lost in Almiron, but we don't really have in our midfield at the moment in terms of that energy, pace and legs. And the fact he's two-footed is just a lovely bonus on top of that with a ceiling to get better. But if we don't, there's other options out there. Very similar in statistics to Elanga, right foot, left foot, and the ceiling of the player as well is Semenyo from Bournemouth. That's another interesting one. I don't know whether Newcastle United are definitely interested in that player. There's another one to keep an eye on. But anyway, let's sit back, crack open a beer. The first bid has been made of the summer, which is really, really positive. It's £45 million, which, let's be totally honest, Newcastle fans, we don't want to get too precious and too entitled. That is still a hell of a lot of money as a first bid in a window with 2 months left, and see where this one progresses. But anyway, get down, let us know your thoughts. Do you like Anthony Elanga? Would you like to see us go back in, or does this one underwhelm you? I have a lot of faith. Whoever Eddie Howe wants, I want, because he seems to really like this player, and his transfer record since joining Newcastle is pretty meticulous. I just love the man in general, but I want your thoughts in the comments. Get down, get new Black and White Banter across all social media. There's lots of content coming up, as I mentioned, and I'll see you on the next one. And as always, keep the faith. Who are you there?